The rain tapped against the window like tiny fingers drumming on glass. Inside the small coffee shop on 5th Street, the smell of fresh coffee beans mixed with the sound of quiet conversations and clicking laptop keys. It was exactly 2:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and everything was perfectly normal. David sat in his usual corner booth, the one with the slightly wobbly table that he had learned to balance with a folded napkin. His laptop screen glowed softly as he worked on a new logo design for a local bakery. The cursor blinked patiently as he stared at the half-finished drawing of a wheat stalk, trying to decide if it needed another curve or if it was already perfect. This was his routine. Every Tuesday, same time, same seat, same medium dark roast. Coffee that he would nurse for 3 hours while he worked. The barista, a college student with purple hair, knew his order by heart. She would wave when he walked in and have his coffee ready before he even reached the counter. David liked routines. They made sense. They were safe. They never surprised him or asked him to be anything other than what he already was. At 32, he had built a life that fit him like a comfortable old sweater. His small apartment was organized and quiet. His freelance design work paid the bills without demanding too much of his time or energy. His social life was limited to polite conversations with neighbors and the occasional phone call from his sister who lived across the country. 2 years ago, his last serious relationship had ended when his girlfriend told him she felt like she was dating a ghost. "You're here, but you're not really here," she had said, packing her things into cardboard boxes. "It's like you're afraid to actually live your life." He had tried to argue, but deep down, he knew she was right. After she left, David had made peace with being alone. It was easier than risking that kind of pain again, easier than having to explain himself to someone who might leave anyway. The coffee shop had become his compromise with the world. He could be around people without having to engage with them. He could feel connected without risking connection. The other customers came and went like characters in a movie he was watching, but not part of. Today felt no different from any other Tuesday. The same soft jazz played through the speakers. The same businessman sat at the counter scrolling through emails on his phone. The same elderly woman occupied the table by the window, reading a paperback novel with a cup of tea that had probably gone cold an hour ago. David adjusted the wheat stalk on his screen, making it slightly thinner. The bakery owner wanted something that felt warm and welcoming, and David was trying to capture that feeling in simple lines and curves. It was the kind of work he was good at, translating other people's dreams into visual form while keeping his own dreams safely locked away. He took a sip of his coffee and glanced at the clock on his laptop. 2:45. In exactly 45 minutes, he would pack up his things, walk the 6 blocks to his apartment, heat up leftover pasta for dinner, and spend the evening watching documentaries until it was time for bed. Tomorrow, he would work from home. Thursday, he might venture out to the grocery store. Friday, he would return to this same booth. It was a predictable life, maybe even a boring one, but it was his. No one could hurt him if he didn't let them get close enough. No one could disappoint him if he didn't expect anything from them. No one could leave him if he never really let them in. The rain was getting heavier now, turning the window into a watercolor painting of blurred streetlights and moving shadows. David found himself watching the people hurrying past on the sidewalk, their umbrellas bent against the wind. Everyone seemed to be rushing somewhere important, somewhere they needed to be. He envied them sometimes, those people with places to go and people waiting for them. But envy was dangerous. It made you want things you couldn't have, made you take risks you couldn't afford. It was better to stay in his corner booth, safe and dry, working on other people's dreams. The bell above the coffee shop door chimed softly as another customer entered, shaking water from their jacket. David didn't look up. He had learned not to be curious about strangers. Curiosity led to connection, and connection led to complications he wasn't ready for. Instead, he focused on his screen, adding a small shadow beneath the wheat stalk to make it look more three-dimensional. The bakery owner would probably approve. She seemed like the type of person who appreciated subtle details, the kind of touches that made something ordinary feel special. David understood the appeal of ordinary things. There was beauty in simplicity, comfort in predictability. His life might not be exciting, but it was peaceful. His heart might be guarded, but it was safe. His dreams might be small, but they were achievable. He had no way of knowing that in less than 5 minutes a woman with rain-damp hair and arms full of shopping bags would walk directly to his table, drop everything she was carrying with a loud thump, and completely upend the carefully ordered world he had spent 2 years building. He had no way of knowing that this ordinary Tuesday was about to become the most extraordinary day of his life. For now, he simply sat in his corner, booth, adjusting the curve of a wheat stalk, listening to the rain and believing that tomorrow would be exactly the same as today. He was wrong. The coffee shop door flew open with such force that it hit the wall behind it, making everyone look up from their laptops and conversations. The little bell above the door didn't just chime, it practically screamed as a woman burst through the entrance like she was running from something terrible. She was soaked. Her dark hair stuck to her face and neck, and water dripped from her jacket onto the wooden floor. But it wasn't just the rain that made her look like she'd been through a storm. Her eyes were wide and slightly wild, like someone who had just made a decision that scared her more than staying put ever could. In her arms she carried what looked like half of a department store. Shopping bags hung from both elbows. A cardboard box balanced against her hip, and a stuffed backpack threatened to slip off her shoulder with every step. She looked around the coffee shop like she was searching for something specific, her breathing quick and shallow. David glanced up from his wheat stalk design, annoyed that his concentration had been broken. He was used to the quiet rhythm of the coffee shop, the gentle murmur of normal people doing normal things. This woman was clearly not normal, and she was definitely not quiet. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, everything stopped. David felt something strange happen in his chest, like his heart had forgotten how to beat properly. The woman stared at him with an intensity that made him want to look away, but he couldn't. She had the kind of face that told stories, expressive eyebrows, eyes that seemed to hold secrets, and a mouth that looked like it smiled often, even when she was clearly having the worst day of her life. Then she started walking toward him. David's first instinct was to look behind himself, certain she must be heading for someone else. But there was only a wall behind his corner booth, and she was definitely coming his way. With purpose, with determination, with all those shopping bags and that wild look in her eyes. Please don't let this be happening, he thought, but it was too late. She reached his table and, without a word of explanation or even a hello, began dropping her bags onto his workspace. The cardboard box landed right next to his coffee cup. A shopping bag full of what looked like art supplies scattered across, his carefully organized napkins. Her backpack slumped against his laptop bag like an old friend settling in for a long visit. David opened his mouth to protest, to tell her she had the wrong table, wrong person, wrong life. But before he could form a single word, she slid into the seat across from him and said the last thing he expected to hear. "I'm hiding." She said it like it was the most normal thing in the world, like strangers shared tables and personal crises every day. Her voice was slightly breathless but surprisingly calm, considering she looked like she'd just escaped from something dramatic. David blinked. "You're... what?" "Hiding," she repeated, pushing wet hair away from her face. "My ex-fiancé is about 2 blocks away with his new girlfriend, and I just realized I left something important at his place. Something I need to get back, but I can't face him today. Maybe not ever." She paused to catch her breath, and David noticed that her hands were shaking slightly, not from cold, but from whatever had sent her running through the rain with arms full of purchases. "So I panicked," she continued, gesturing at the bags surrounding them. "I went into 3 different stores and bought random things because I couldn't think straight. Art supplies, books, a plant that I don't know how to take care of, and these weird organic cookies that probably taste like cardboard. I just kept buying things because moving felt better than thinking." David stared at her. This was not how his Tuesdays usually went. This was not how his life usually went. People didn't just appear at his table and start confessing their problems to him. He was the invisible man in the corner, the one who watched other people's dramas from a safe distance. "I hope you don't mind sharing the table," she said, though she was clearly already settled in. I know this is weird, but I saw you sitting here looking so calm and peaceful, and I thought maybe some of that might rub off on me. Plus, you have the best table in the place. Corner booth, good lighting, perfect view of the door in case I need to make another escape. She was right about the table. David had chosen this spot specifically because it felt safe and allowed him to observe, without being observed. Apparently his strategy had backfired. I'm usually not this much of a disaster, she added, though her smile suggested she might be lying just a little. Today has been complicated. David found himself nodding, though he wasn't sure why. Something about her honesty was disarming. Most people spent so much energy pretending their lives were perfect, but this woman had just laid her chaos out on his table like it was something they could sort through together. What's your name? She asked suddenly. David, he heard himself say, surprising them both. I'm Luna, she said, and somehow the name fit perfectly. She had that kind of unpredictable brightness that reminded him of moonlight on water, beautiful but impossible to hold on to. Luna, he repeated, testing the sound of it. It means moon in Spanish, she explained. My grandmother chose it because she said I was born to light up dark places. Though right now I feel more like I'm the dark place that needs lighting up. She laughed, but it was a sad sound that made David want to do something to help, though he had no idea what. He was good at solving design problems, not people problems. He was good at staying in his lane, not getting involved in someone else's complicated life. But Luna was looking at him like he might have answers, and for the first time in 2 years, David wanted to try. So, he said carefully, what did you leave at your ex-fiance's place? Luna's smile turned genuine for the first time since she'd walked in. That, she said, is a very good question. Luna reached into her backpack and pulled out a small velvet box that looked like it had seen better days. She placed it on the table between them, right next to David's coffee cup, like it was the most natural thing in the world. This, she said, opening the box to reveal an empty space where a ring should have been, is what I left behind. Well, not the box itself, but what used to be in it. David looked at the empty ring box, and then back at Luna's face. Your engagement ring? The engagement ring I was supposed to wear but never really wanted, she said, closing the box with a soft snap. I took it off 3 weeks ago when I realized I was planning a wedding to someone I didn't actually want to marry. But I left it on his kitchen counter when I moved out, and now I need it back. She paused, running her fingers over the worn velvet. Not because I want to wear it again, but because it was my grandmother's ring first. She gave it to my mother, who gave it to me. And someday I want to give it to someone who will wear it because they actually want to, not because it's what everyone expects them to do. David found himself leaning forward, drawn into her story despite every instinct telling him to stay uninvolved. Why don't you just call him and ask for it back? Luna laughed, but not in a happy way. Because Robert, my ex, he's not exactly the understanding type. He thinks I'm going through a phase like wanting to live my own life is just some temporary madness that I'll get over. He keeps texting me about how we can work things out and get back on track. She pulled out her phone and showed David a string of messages. Look at this. Luna, stop being dramatic. We're good together. Your family loves me. We have plans. Like my feelings are just an inconvenience that can be managed with better planning. David read the messages and felt something unexpected. Anger. He barely knew this woman, but the dismissive tone in those texts bothered him more than it should have. He sounds like he doesn't really listen to you. That's the thing, Luna said, putting her phone away. He never listened to me, not really. When I told him I wanted to quit my marketing job to teach art to kids, he said it was impractical. When I said I wanted to travel before we settled, down he said we needed to focus on our careers. Every dream I had was just something to be talked out of or postponed until later. She opened one of her shopping bags and pulled out a set of watercolor paints, still in their packaging. I bought these today because I haven't painted in 3 years. 3 years. I used to paint every day when I was younger. But Robert said, it was a hobby, not a real career, so I put my easel in storage and learned to create marketing campaigns instead. David looked at the paint set and remembered his own abandoned dreams. He'd wanted to create art once too, before he decided that safe client work was more practical than risky creativity. What kind of things did you use to paint? He asked. Luna's face lit up in a way that transformed her completely. Everything, people, places, feelings. I loved painting emotions, trying to capture what happiness looked like in color, or how sadness moved across a canvas. My grandmother used to say I painted with my heart instead of my eyes. She opened the box of paints and touched one of the tubes gently. She taught me that art wasn't about making pretty pictures. It was about telling the truth, even when the truth was messy or complicated or didn't fit in a nice frame. Your grandmother sounds wise, David said, and he meant it. She was the wisest person I knew, Luna agreed. She's the one who told me that the right person would love me because of who I really am, not despite it. That's how I knew Robert wasn't right for me. He loved the version of me that fit into his plans, but he didn't even see the real me. David felt a strange recognition in her words. His ex-girlfriend had said something similar, that he never let her see who he really was. But Luna was different. In just one afternoon, she'd shown him more of herself than most people revealed in months. What about you? Luna asked suddenly. What's your story? And don't say you don't have one, because everyone has a story. David hesitated. He wasn't used to talking about himself, wasn't comfortable being the center of someone's attention. But Luna waited patiently, her dark eyes encouraging without being pushy. I design logos and websites, he said finally. Freelance work, mostly for small businesses. That's what you do, Luna said gently. Not who you are. What do you dream about when nobody's watching? It was such a simple question, but it hit David like a punch to the chest. When had he stopped dreaming? When had he started defining himself only by the safe, practical things he did to pay bills? I used to want to design book covers, he admitted, surprising himself. Fantasy novels, science fiction, mystery stories. I loved the idea of creating the first thing people would see, the image that would make them want to dive into a whole other world. Luna smiled, and it was like sunshine, breaking through clouds. That sounds amazing. Why don't you do that? Because it's not practical, David heard himself saying, and immediately realized he sounded exactly like Luna's ex-fiancé. I mean, there's not much money in it, and the competition is fierce, and it's scary to want something that matters to you, Luna finished for him. I get it. It's safer to stick with things that feel manageable, even if they don't feed your soul. She was right, and David didn't know how to feel about that. Luna had known him for less than 2 hours, but she'd seen something he'd been hiding from himself for years. Maybe, he said slowly. We're both running away from things. You're running from a life that didn't fit, and I'm running from a life that might. Luna reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. It was just a moment of contact, but David felt it like electricity. Maybe, she said, we don't have to run anymore. Outside, the rain was starting to slow, but neither of them noticed. They were too busy discovering that sometimes the most important conversations happen with strangers who turn out not to be strangers at all. The coffee shop was getting ready to close when Luna looked at her phone and realized something that made her stomach drop. She had nowhere to go. Oh, she said quietly, staring at the screen. I just remembered I'm technically homeless right now. David looked up from his laptop, where he'd been showing Luna some of his old book cover designs that he'd never submitted anywhere. What do you mean? I've been staying in my car for the past week, Luna admitted, her cheeks turning pink. I couldn't afford to break my lease early, and Robert's name was on everything anyway. I've been parking behind the 24-hour laundromat and using the gym for showers. It's actually not as bad as it sounds, but tonight... She gestured toward the window where the rain had started coming down harder again. The idea of sleeping in a car during a storm like this seemed less like an adventure and more like a recipe for disaster. David felt something shift inside his chest. All afternoon he'd been drawn to Luna's honesty, her courage to speak her truth even when it was messy. Now she was vulnerable in a way that made his protective instincts kick in, instincts he didn't even know he had. "I have a couch," he heard himself say. "It's not fancy, but it's dry and warm." Luna looked at him with surprise. "David, you don't even know me. I could be crazy. I could be a serial killer who collects art supplies." "Are you?" he asked with a small smile. "Well, no, but that's exactly what a serial killer would say," Luna pointed out, though she was smiling too. "I'll take my chances," David said, and realized he meant it. For the first time in years, he was willing to take a chance on something, on someone. They packed up their things together, Luna stuffing her various purchases back into bags while David closed his laptop and gathered his usual coffee shop supplies. It felt natural, like they'd done this routine hundreds of times before. The walk to David's apartment was only 4 blocks, but they were both soaked by the time they reached his building. Luna laughed as she wrung water from her hair in the lobby, and the sound echoed off the walls like music. "I must look like a drowned rat," she said, checking her reflection in the mailbox glass. "You look like someone who's not afraid of a little rain," David replied, and Luna's smile in response made his heart skip. His apartment was exactly what Luna had expected: clean, organized, and carefully neutral. Everything had its place, from the books arranged by height on the shelves to the single coffee mug drying in the dish rack. It was the home of someone who had learned to live small, to take up only the space he absolutely needed. "It's perfect," Luna said, and she meant it. "It feels peaceful." "It feels empty," David admitted, seeing his space through her eyes. "I never really noticed before." Luna set down her bags and walked to the window that overlooked the city. Even through the rain, the lights below created a pattern of warmth and life. "It's not empty," she said. "It's waiting." Over the next few days, Luna's presence began to fill the spaces David hadn't realized were hollow. She spread her art supplies across his kitchen table and painted watercolor portraits of the people she watched from his window. She reorganized his spice rack, not alphabetically but by color, creating a rainbow that made him smile every time he opened the cabinet. She convinced him to order pizza instead of eating his usual Tuesday pasta. She made him laugh by doing impressions of the pigeons on his fire escape. She fell asleep on his couch reading one of his fantasy novels, and when he found her there in the morning, curled up with the book still open on her chest, something in his heart that had been locked up tight began to open. "You're different than I thought you'd be," Luna told him on their 4th evening together. They were sitting on his fire escape, sharing Chinese takeout and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Different how?" David asked. "Braver," she said simply. "When I first saw you in that coffee shop, you looked so careful, like you were holding yourself together with sheer willpower. But you're not fragile at all. You're just considerate, thoughtful. You think before you act, which is something I should probably try sometime." David laughed. "And you're different than I thought too." "How so?" "You're not chaos," he said, watching her face as the golden light made her eyes look like warm honey. "You're change. Good change. The kind that makes everything better, even when it's scary." Luna set down her container of noodles and turned to face him fully. "David, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Are you happy? I mean, really happy, with the life you had before I barged into it?" It was a question that should have been easy to answer, but David found himself thinking carefully. Was he happy? Or was he just comfortable? Was there a difference? "I was safe," he said finally. "But no, I don't think I was happy. I think I was just waiting." "Waiting for what?" David looked at Luna, this woman who had entered his life like a summer storm and changed everything without even trying. She had challenged him to dream again, to take risks, to live in full color instead of careful black and white. "For you," he said quietly. "I think I was waiting for you." Luna's breath caught, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then, without overthinking it for once, she reached over and took his hand. "I'm glad you waited," she said. "I'm glad we found each other. That night, as David set up blankets and pillows on the couch like he had every night since Luna had been staying with him, she caught his hand. "David," she said softly. "Yeah? I don't want to sleep on the couch tonight." David felt his heart. "Stop, then start again twice as fast. Luna, are you sure? We've only known each other a week and you're going through a difficult time and I don't want you to feel like you have to." She silenced him by placing her finger gently against his lips. "I'm sure," she said. "I'm sure because for the first time in years I feel like myself when I'm with you. I'm sure because you see me, really see me, and you're still here. I'm sure because I've spent so long being careful and practical and doing what other people expected me to do, and I don't want to be careful about this." David searched her face and saw no doubt there, only a quiet certainty that matched something deep in his own heart. "Okay," he said, and it was the easiest decision he'd ever made. Luna smiled and kissed him softly, and David realized that some risks were worth taking, some changes were worth embracing, some people were worth opening your heart for even when it scared you, especially when it scared you. 6 months later, David still went to the same coffee shop every Tuesday at 2:30, but everything else about his life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. His corner booth looked different now. Instead of just his laptop and a single coffee cup, the table was decorated with Luna's small watercolor paintings that she'd started leaving for him each week. Tiny portraits of their life together. There was one of his hands typing on the keyboard, another of the view from their apartment window, and his favorite, a painting of 2 coffee cups side by side, steam rising from both in the shape of intertwined hearts. "Our table," Luna called it now, and the barista with purple hair always saved it for them even on busy days. David's laptop was open to a website he'd been working on for 3 weeks, his own portfolio site showcasing book cover designs. Luna had finally convinced him to create sample covers for his favorite novels and submit them to publishers. It had taken months of gentle encouragement and not so gentle pushing, but he'd finally found the courage to share his real dreams with the world. "The worst they can say is no," Luna had told him, "and you're already living with no by not trying. At least if they reject your work, you'll know you gave it a shot." She was right, as she usually was about things that mattered. David looked up as the coffee shop door opened, and Luna walked in carrying a small potted succulent and wearing paint-stained clothes that somehow made her look more beautiful than any fancy outfit ever could. She'd started teaching art classes at the community center, and Tuesday afternoons had become her time to experiment with new techniques she wanted to share with her students. "How did the flower painting lesson go?" David asked as she slid into the seat across from him. "Amazing," Luna said, her eyes bright with excitement. "We had this 8-year-old named Tyler who insisted on painting his flowers purple with orange polka dots, and when his mom tried to correct him, he said, 'But these are dream flowers, not regular flowers.'" Dream flowers. Can you imagine? David could imagine it perfectly. Living with Luna had taught him that the world was full of magic if you were brave enough to see it. She had a gift for finding wonder in ordinary moments, and somehow her way of seeing had become his way of seeing, too. "Speaking of dreams," Luna said, reaching into her bag, "I have something for you." She pulled out an envelope with his name written in her flowing handwriting. David opened it and found a letter from a small publishing house he'd submitted designs to 2 weeks ago. His heart raced as he read the first line. "We are pleased to inform you that we would like to offer you a contract." "Luna," he breathed. "They want me to design covers for their entire fantasy series, 6 books." "I know," she said, grinning. "They called me first because I put my number as your business contact. I hope you don't mind, but I may have screamed a little when they told me." David stared at the letter, then at Luna, then back at the letter, his first real book cover contract. The dream he'd been too afraid to chase for years was actually happening. "How did you know?" he asked. "How did you know I could do this when I didn't even believe it myself?" "Because I see you," Luna said simply. "The real you. The you that you're scared to be because it feels too big, too risky, too much." "But David, you were never meant to live small. You were meant to create beautiful things that help people escape into other worlds. David reached across the table and took her hand. 6 months ago, the simple gesture would have felt overwhelming. Now it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "What about you?" he asked. "Any news from the gallery?" Luna's cheeks turned pink, which usually meant good news she was trying not to get too excited about. "They want to give me a show," she said, trying to sound casual and failing completely. "Just a small one, in their back room, but it's a real show with real paintings that real people might actually buy." "Luna, that's incredible." David stood up and pulled her into a hug, right there in the middle of the coffee shop. He didn't care who saw them or what anyone thought. Luna deserved to be celebrated for the brave, talented, amazing person she was. Their life together had found a rhythm over the past few months, but it wasn't the careful, predictable routine David had lived before. It was better, a balance between his need for stability and her love of spontaneity. She'd taught him that security didn't have to mean settling, and he'd taught her that dreams were more achievable when you made plans to reach them. They'd had their challenges, of course. Luna's impulsive decisions still gave David minor heart attacks sometimes, like when she'd surprised him by signing them up for salsa dancing lessons without asking. And his tendency to overthink everything occasionally frustrated Luna, especially when she wanted to book a weekend trip and he needed 3 days to research every possible hotel option. But they'd learned to balance each other. Luna's spontaneity pushed David to take healthy risks and try new things. David's thoughtfulness helped Luna turn her creative energy into concrete achievements. Together, they were braver than either of them had ever been alone. "I have something else for you," Luna said, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a small wrapped package tied with a ribbon she'd probably painted herself. "What's this for?" David asked. "It's been exactly 6 months since I invaded your life," she said with a smile. "I wanted to mark the anniversary of the best terrible decision I ever made." David unwrapped the package and found a keychain with coordinates engraved on one side. He recognized them immediately, the exact location of their table in the coffee shop. On the other side was a message in Luna's handwriting. "Home is wherever you are." "Luna?" David started, but she held up her hand. "Let me say this," she said. 6 months ago, I was running away from everything I thought my life was supposed to be. I was scared and lost and had no idea what came next. But running into your life, literally running into your life, was the first time I'd ever run toward something instead of away from it." She paused, her eyes getting a little teary. "You didn't just give me a place to sleep that first night. You gave me a place to belong. You made me feel like coming home to myself was not just possible, but safe." David felt his own eyes getting wet. "You saved me too," he said. "I was so busy protecting myself from getting hurt that I forgot how to really live. You reminded me that the best things in life are worth the risk." "So what do you say?" Luna asked, gesturing around their coffee shop, their corner booth, their life together. "Should we keep taking risks together?" David looked at this woman who had entered his life like a force of nature and claimed not just his heart but his whole future. She was still unpredictable, still the kind of person who bought plants on impulse and painted her feelings. She was also home. "Yes," he said, meaning it more than he'd ever meant anything. "Let's keep taking risks together." Luna smiled and opened her sketchbook to a fresh page. "Good," she said, pulling out her watercolors, "because I have about 1,000,000 more terrible, wonderful ideas, and I'm going to need someone sensible around to help me make them happen." David laughed and opened his laptop to work on his latest book cover design. Outside, it was starting to rain again, just like it had been that first Tuesday when everything changed. But this time neither of them minded the storm. They had each other, they had their dreams, and they had all the time in the world to build something beautiful together. Some stories end when two people find each other, but the best stories, David realized, are just beginning.